Sure, sex is great, but have you ever tried not having sex as a nonviolent means of enacting social change? No? Me neither, but many people have throughout human history, and one group is doing it right now, and I want to talk about it. This story is about Orthodox Jews living here in the United States. Under traditional Jewish law, women are essentially chained to their husbands and cannot get a divorce unless the husband grants it. Women who apply for a divorce but are turned down are known as agonot. And there are at least hundreds of them in the United States, although the exact numbers are tough to come by thanks to the insularity of these communities. This is obviously extremely fucked up. It's misogynistic, it's patriarchal, it's abusive. And while this is often hidden away from the public eye, right now there is one woman who has very publicly become the face of the Agana, Malki Gold Berkowitz, who has been trying and failing to divorce her husband, Volvi Berkowitz, for more than 4 years in the upper New York enclave of Kiryas Joel. Her fellow Orthodox women heard about Malki's story and they rallied to help, going so far as protesting outside their house, but all to no avail. The protests have been led by Adina Sash, a feminist who goes by @Flatbush Girl on Insta, where she has nearly 70,000 followers. I'm going to pause here to acknowledge something that if I don't, there's going to probably be annoying comments down there that I don't care to see. I mean, there's going to be annoying comments anyway. I know how YouTube works, but let me go ahead and say this. I have reams and reams of disagreements with the women in this story. Not only do they practice a very strict conservative religion, and I am a very progressive, no gods, no masters atheist, but Sash also says that she is a Zionist, and you all know how I feel about that whole thing. But I'm also an adult, and so I can divorce, so to speak, my feelings on those topics from my feelings on what is happening in this specific circumstance. And just as I exist in a flawed patriarchal culture, and I try to fight for equality from within that culture, there are people who, for one reason or another, are part of another culture or religious community that I might find extremely problematic, even much more so than my own. And those people still deserve to fight for progress from within that culture. Though, yes, I'm sure all of us have at one point fantasized about wandering into the woods and starting our own commune where we can just start from scratch. But I really, truly would miss video games and chocolate. So, we stay and we fight. And so when the protests were not getting results, Sash launched a new offensive, a sex strike. She's labeled it a mikvah strike, so named for the rule that says that following menstruation, a woman needs to ritually bathe herself before shtupping her husband. She has been asking her fellow Orthodox wives to refuse to have sex with their husbands on Friday nights.
We're going to start with one small experiment, okay? We're not going to make public pledges, and we're not going to make a big balagan. We're going to start yachid b'yachid, yechida b'yechida. And I'm going to ask you, as a kala teacher, we know that Friday night, Shabbos, it's mitzvah night. Please call your husband. Call your husband and tell him, I'm sorry. I am closed for business this Shabbos. If you want to have relations with me, please figure out a way to help free Malki. Call your friends, call all the Rabbanim you know, and try to figure out a way to help free an Agana of over 4 years. She needs a get, and every single day is more and more torturous for her. Imagine what your husband is feeling for one day is what Malki and Volvi separately have been feeling for over 4 years.
And this is how I learned that that's a thing, apparently. Mitzvah nights, when tradition apparently calls for couples to have sex every Friday. And I think that's nice, if it's a suggestion and not a hard and fast rule, so to speak. But whatever tickles God's pickle, I guess. He just wants to relax on a Friday night and watch you guys fuck. So, sure. But in this case, she's asking the women to politely tell their husbands, we're not going to fuck until this Agana is free. The idea, of course, is that by refusing sex until she's freed, wives will force the husbands to pay attention to the issue and then go talk to their rabbis and get things fixed somehow. Orthodox Judaism, like most religions, is patriarchal. Men have the power to make the rules. They have the power to interpret the rules and to change the rules as needed. So this is a way for women who have less political power to try to exercise some kind of control. This is not a unique situation. There have already been stories of women in other Orthodox communities using sex strikes as a way to help their local agunot, though it's hard to say what the success rate has been for that. The difference here is that this one has spread beyond that tight-knit enclave, and so it does have the potential to have a much bigger impact, which might even mean systemic change, as opposed to just some secret local rule bending while the rest of the adherents continue to suffer. This sex strike is also, of course, not unique to Orthodox Judaism. The cultural touchstone for sex strikes here in the West is usually Lysistrata, a Greek comedy by Aristophanes, in which the women of the Greek city-states endeavor to end the Peloponnesian War by, you guessed it, not having sex with their husbands. If we sat around at home all made up, Lysistrata tells the other women, and walked past the men wearing only our diaphanous underwear with our pubes plucked in a neat triangle, and our husbands got hard and hankered to ball us, but we didn't go near them and kept away, they'd sue for peace, and pretty quick, you can count on that. It's passages like that that made being a classics minor in college really fun. 5 stars, recommended, would matriculate again. Lysistrata was a comedy in which the women teased the desperate, sex-starved men into doing their bidding, but the real-world instances of sex strikes have been anything but comedic. In 2003, Lema Bowie helped form the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace as a cross-cultural coalition of Christian and Muslim women using nonviolent tactics to end the Second Liberian Civil War. As with most wars in human history, women there had little power to make decisions, but were forced to deal with horrifying conditions, including, of course, rape and sexual assault. So they organized large protests, including agreeing to withhold sex from their husbands in the hope that their husbands, too, would start pushing for peace. They eventually won, but it took far more than just a sex strike. For instance, during peace negotiations, the women surrounded the building where the negotiations were happening, and whenever any man tried to leave the building without a peace deal in place, the women threatened to take their clothes off, which would have shamed and even cursed the men who saw them. The negotiations continued until peace was agreed upon. In 2011, Bowie received the Nobel Peace Prize for her important work. It wasn't just important work, though. It was also dangerous work. Not only were these women protesting while surrounded by warring men who were already enslaving, raping, and murdering them, but now they were risking the violent reaction of their own husbands, because a certain type of man will not be denied sex so easily. As Bowie told the classics scholar Helen Morales in 2013, in urban communities, once the strike had started, women came to meetings with bruises on their faces. Their husbands had raped them or had beaten them until they consented to opt out of the strike. This was the reality of the Liberian sex strike that has so charmed the Western media. And that's the thrust of Morales' argument in her essay. It seems as though every time women are reported to be withholding sex as a tactic to improve their lives, the Western media rushes to label them the new Lysistratas, which distorts and cheapens the action by comparing it and sort of turning it into a titillating comedy. Morales ends her essay with this excellent anecdote. At the end of our interview, I asked Lema Bowie whether she had ever read Lysistrata. She said that she had, but only recently. She had won an award, and a friend gave her a copy of the play as a celebratory gift. I asked her what she thought about the play and the comparisons that have been made in the press. She said nothing, but gave a long look of unmitigated contempt. Morales points out that even Aristophanes' contemporaries had to suspend their disbelief to enjoy this comedy. forgetting that men can always find a sexual outlet, whether through rape, prostitution, side pieces, or good old Pamela and her 5 sisters. The idea that a sex strike alone would cause men to be so sexually frustrated that they would enact systemic change is silly, even though it could be one tool that could get the attention of the men in a community and also get the attention of the world at large. In her memoir, Lema Bowie wrote that the sex strike had little or no practical effect, but it was extremely valuable in getting us media attention. Morales compares it to other famous sex strikes, like the crossed legs movement in a small Colombian town, in which women refused to have sex or bear children until officials established safe roads to connect their town to others nearby. In this instance, the so-called sex strike has been successful largely because it drew publicity to the problem, not because withholding sex prompted men into changing their behavior. As in this case, the men were already fully on board with getting a goddamn safe road built into their town. Not only does the platonic ideal of a sex strike require forgetting that men have other options, it also fundamentally requires signing on to some pretty outdated ideas of gender and sexuality. The idea that men are the ones who want or even need sex in a relationship, that women have no power beyond their physical bodies and the pleasure they can give to others, that sex is an essential component of all relationships, and even the phrase sex strike itself, which explicitly centers sex as labor that women are expected to perform not for their own pleasure, but for the benefit of their bosses, of their husbands. It also erases homosexual relationships. Are lesbians meant to stop having sex with each other? Can gay men continue to hook up without being traitors to the cause? Should an asexual couple start having sex several times a day just so they can feel like they too are contributing? Anyway, these are all the things I've been thinking about since I first saw the news of the mikveh strike to free Malky. I literally saw that and decided I wanted to make a video on it because I thought, oh, that's funny. That'll be a funny video to make. I've made several videos lately that are really serious and they take a lot out of me. So when I saw this, I thought, oh, cool. An empowering protest that we can discuss, get a few giggles out of it because we can talk about sex. And also, it's funny because some Orthodox men are, in fact, losing their shit over this. And, the hilarity of a sex strike may work on others the same way it worked on me, meaning that the message will spread further and bring more attention to the plight of Orthodox women who are trapped in abusive marriages. But obviously, the more I researched this, the more complicated it all got. And now I can't even laugh about how great of a punk rock band name Mikveh Sex Strike would be. Oh, well, at least we all learned something, and I got to finally use my classics minor from college that everybody told me was a waste of my time. A cheap behok osores. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.